Hello again. This is my second video journal entry. Today's March the 12th, 2016. It seemed like a lot of you guys liked the last video, and a bunch of you mentioned that you really liked the funny stories. So I thought, well, nothing really happened today at work that was particularly funny. I mean, my ass was sat, even though I didn't have an assignment today for being at the computer by the heater. I did end up having to fill in for someone that was just too busy to do their job. So I had to sit by that fucking heater again. You can see I'm wearing short sleeves, so, I should be fine, except they had it turned up to 26 today because it's really cold out. You can see it's not snowing anymore. It actually, the sun came out for a couple hours, and even if it's well below freezing, it still melts here. I think it's negative 12 out right now, Celsius. So it's still pretty freaking cold. And so, of course, they have the heat set up insanely. And yeah, so my ass was on fire again. But that's like not a new story. It's just old shit. And nothing else happened at all today that was exciting. So I thought I should talk about something that's happened maybe in the past. Um, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. So probably about maybe a year ago, um, my spouse teaches English at one of the private English conversation schools that are so popular around Japan, and we were invited to a dinner with one of their students, and he had asked if we liked seafood, which Hokkaido is very famous for. And of course, we both do. So he was like, okay, there's this place. It's kind of far out. It's in a really small town, but it has the cheapest, best seafood, izakaya, which is kind of like a pub. I think that's the closest equivalent. And you pay like a set fee, and you get a multi-course meal of chef's choice, the best everything, freshest everything, seasonally, and it comes all you can drink, which is pretty common actually in Japan and absolutely wonderful. So we go out to this town. It's probably within half an hour on the train, and we meet him there, and then we walk to this little izakaya. And to give you an idea, a lot of these specialty places are really small, so um, there's probably five tables on the floor, each table sitting about five people, and then there's three seats at the bar where the chef is behind, of course, because he's preparing all the fresh seafood. And him and his wife run the place, so she takes the orders and he does all the cooking. So we sit down and we're having a nice meal, and they bring the courses out in succession. So, I'm starting with a little bit of sake, they're all having beer, and, we're talking mostly in English because it's practice for their student. And they're bringing out some delicious grilled fish, and they bring a sashimi platter. And of course, it's like all fresh. You could see the guy behind the counter cutting all the fish, like taking it, doing it all. And one of the things that's there is the botan ebi, which is one of the most delicious and expensive shrimp or prawns, depending on where you're from. And they're incredibly sweet. I've had them before, and they come peeled down to the back of the tail, but the head's still on, which is pretty normal. And so they sit them down, and as she's setting it on the table, just out of the corner of my eye, I notice a little twitch. One of the legs just twitch. And I was like, well, he just cut them. Like, he took them out of the tank, sliced them up, put them on, like, nerve impulse. No big deal. Except as we continue talking, we're eating some of the stuff that had been set there earlier because it was warm. Um, and I keep noticing the twitching. It's one shrimp in particular that keeps twitching, and I'm like, I'm not gonna eat that shrimp. I don't mind that that's the thing, but I personally, I'm not gonna eat that shrimp. So, we're sitting, and I notice it kind of flick. So like if this is its back and it's normally curved like this, it kind of kicks like that. And I'm like, oh Lord, because it hits another shrimp and that shrimp twitches. And I'm like, oh no, I just want to eat these delicious shrimp without having any problem. But I don't want to be the first one because what if I touch the shrimp that isn't moving and it moves? That's gonna like freak everyone out at the table. And I'm already trying not to freak out my spouse who hasn't noticed any twitching yet. And we're talking, and my spouse is reaching across the table to get something, and that fucking shrimp jumps. And I'm not talking like that. I'm talking straight up in the air, falls over, half off the plate, half onto the table, hitting another shrimp, making it twitch. And my spouse flips. I mean, they hadn't known that anything else was going on. I just kind of stand there like, oh shit. Because, of course, I was trying to keep from saying anything. And their students just kind of laughing at us and everything for, particularly for the freaking out reaction. Because it was still alive. And that's just something, we usually don't eat in the U.S. But, I was like, I'll eat one, and I asked the guy how to eat it, even though I'd done it once before. Just to be like, look, it's okay, to kind of, make my spouse not worry too much. And to show that, just because it's twitching, it's not all foreigners freaked out by eating things that are still alive, even though it's generally true. Because there's a lot of times in Japan, if you say that's something that you do, sometimes with people, there's an assumption that that's something that everyone from your country and or every foreigner ever does, which I've run into a lot of times. So, I always try to kind of break the stereotype or mention like, oh, this is something I do that's not usual, if it's something that's a little bit different, just so that, it's kept in mind that there's not just one foreigner type that encompasses the entire goddamn world. Japan, seriously, you're just one country. But anyhow, that's neither here nor there. So, I take the head off and I eat it. And my spouse is like, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know. But they managed to do it, and the shrimp were absolutely delicious. They were really the best shrimp I think I've ever had, except for one other place where I've had Botan Ebi, which is actually the restaurant, that pink building right behind me. It's so good. They're known as one of the best in the city, probably the second or third best seafood restaurant here. But that place, it was for everything. And I could go on. I'm going to probably stop here for now, just because of the time. But I do have another story that took place at that restaurant, but it's kind of long, so we'll save that for tomorrow. But I will tell you another shrimp story about head-on shrimp. That's kind of funny and kind of give you an insight into the type of people that I work with. So my company has a warehouse and it has an office, and I spent about 3 months out in the warehouse before I moved into the office. And almost all the people that work there are these old guys. 60 is like young. There's one guy that's my age, and there's one guy that's in his mid-40s, and then literally everyone else that works there is over 60 years old, and most of them are in their 70s and 80s. But they are carrying this heavy shit all over the place like it ain't no thing, and making me feel like about this big and about as weak as mold, really. So anyhow, about once a month, we'd go out to drink and then go to a snack and do like karaoke bar style and all that fun stuff, and get completely wasted and then have to go to work the next day. And we always go to this yakitori place, which is like skewers of grilled chicken, although they have other things. And so we went there as per normal. And you have a menu that you order off of it. It's all you can eat and all you can drink for about the equivalent of $30 US. It's about 3,000 yen. And so we get there and we're all eating, and one person ordered the shrimp sashimi. So we get these beautiful, beautiful prawns, heads on, and I go and I rip the head off and I dip it in a touch of soy sauce. I start eating it, and they're like, "What about the head?" And I knew because I've seen people do this, sucking out the brains and everything. It's supposed to be really, really good because it still has some salt water usually in there, and it's supposed to be really delicious. But I have a thing about the texture of organs, and I can't really do that without my gag reflex initiating. So strange, it never does any other time. But so I just played kind of dumb, as if this was my first time hearing of this, because I didn't want to be rude and I also didn't want to eat it, and I knew they'd try to pressure me. So I just was like, "What are you talking about?" So one guy's like, "See, you do it like that." And I'm like, "Oh, what? Oh, we don't really eat the inside of the heads in my hometown. That's not something that we do." And they're like, "The head's the best part." And one guy's like, "Oh, that guy's weak because he's sucking the brains out. I eat the whole head." And I'm like, "No, you don't eat the whole head." And he's like, "Yeah, yeah." And I was like, "Oh, you're just trying to fool me. You're trying to fool me because I'm the foreigner. You think you can tell me that stuff and it's like a joke." And this guy picks up the head that I haven't eaten, dips it in soy sauce, and just... And I'm like, you're tricking me. This is a trick because you want me to do this, and it's going to be completely gross because I'm the foreigner. You think you can do this to me, knowing full well that that's probably true, but I'm trying to play like I'm real. It's always this fine line you got to do, where I'm like, no, no, you're just tricking me. This is just a joke. So 3 guys end up doing the same thing, where one guy just took the entire shrimp, dipped it in soy sauce, whole thing in his mouth, and these things have really sharp... I can't remember what they're actually called, but the pieces that stick off the mandibles that look kind of like whiskers, that are a sensory thing. Anyhow, so they're incredibly sharp. I'm talking really sharp. Like, I've bled removing shrimp heads when I was making a stir fry because of how sharp they were, and they weren't even cooked at that point. So they're incredibly sharp, and I can't imagine just throwing that in the back of your throat. Like, that would probably make me gag just right then and there. So luckily they ate all the heads, so I couldn't even try it. And they're like, "Do you want us to order more?" And I was like, "No, I'm not falling for your games," and just put my foot down right there. But it was okay. We continued drinking and then went on to the second place and drank there, and then did our karaoke and drinking and more drinking, and suffice to say, I got wasted and had 2 bottles of sake at the first place, shochu and sake at the second place, and then half a bottle of vodka. It was not good. It was a really bad night. I think I slept like an hour. I spent most of the time passed out or throwing up on the toilet. So yeah, that's kind of what it's like to go out with old guys. And then you get up and you go to work the next day as if you weren't trying not to be as hungover as possible. But interestingly enough, not as bad as the Korean dinners I'd been to before. But that's another day, another story, and this is supposed to be about Japan, so I probably should leave out Korean drinking stories. But anyhow, hope you guys enjoyed these 2 little shrimp stories. And tomorrow, well, I'm off, so if something interesting happens out in the world tonight or before I record tomorrow afternoon, I will put that in the video. But until tomorrow, I will see you all. Thank you so much. Bye.